Hello, everyone. Blessings, and thank you for being here with me. Um, I'm constantly monitoring my news feeds to see what kind of crazy things are new, and sometimes they cluster. And sometimes the clustering of the things that comes through sort of weave a larger picture of elements that make a number of different things that normally are separated link up together sort of in a new way. And in this case, it was linking a whole series of things together in a new way. As we're going to see, the major thing had to do with water, new properties of water. I've done live streams in the past. I did a whole live stream on water and the magical properties of water and why it's the most amazing sort of substance in the universe. And I've touched on it a few times in the past, even more recently. A thing in the news feed that showed a massive, unimaginably gigantic quantity of water orbiting around a star in space, free water molecules, water floating in the cosmos. Enough water to make 100 Earths filled with water, and then there is the fact that the body is, 70% water, and the brain is actually a larger percent of water than any place else in the body. And there is, aside from the special properties of water that we have discussed before, that the molecular structure and the atomic molecular structure of water has all kinds of odd and amazing properties, and some of those are quantum properties. Lately, there has come to light new quantum properties of water. And the things that water is able to do with these new quantum properties shifts it into how it works in our biological system and how it works in our brain. Any kind of new information that has to do with quantum properties of water, it means it has a direct relationship to me as a water being that's made mostly of water, and my brain, which is even more made of water. So all the weirdo properties that start to emerge about these quantum properties of water are aligning and synchronizing with the quantum processes that we find in the brain itself. And now we see that some of the quantum computer properties of how the brain functions and how the brain works, and as I have mentioned in the past, how some of the synchronized events that take place throughout the cortex, where brainwave function happens in waves of depolarization across the cortex, and those waves of depolarization happen at different speeds, and we categorize those speeds into beta and alpha and theta and delta and epsilon and gamma and all the rest. That there's something about the speed of the rhythm, which is back to music theory, the concept of rhythmic depolarizations of large groups of neurons that are firing all together in synchronicity, which has to do with deeper laws of coupled oscillators where things are trying to dance together to save energy. So in one state, one way of looking at consciousness itself is that it solves a problem of maximum efficiency in the cosmos, where the cosmos is always trying to get the most work with the least amount of energy expended, because it's an ecological universe reflected in miniature here in my body. So where my body, sort of runs the same rules of trying to get the most work with the least amount of energy expended. Rule number 2, if you remember, rule number 2. Rule number 1, survive at all costs. Rule number 2, be as ecological as possible, get the most work with the least amount of energy expended. We see how there are multiple layers and layers of ways that the body is attempting to accomplish rule number 2 by building double and triple and quadruple duty into each tissue. Everything is doing more than one job at once, but they're all nested together in a way that doing more job actually takes less energy. It's a beautiful, amazing way that the system all works. Today we're going to be honing in on water, the cerebrospinal fluid, the special water fluid that circulates around the brain, inside the deep recesses of the brain, all the way around the brain, and new ramifications where science tends to discover what the rest of us have already known for 70 years or longer. You know, the holistic community has known many things for decades that modern medicine has poo-pooed as quackery and pseudoscience until medicine discovers it, and then they make a big announcement that they discovered it, which is baloney. Today we have examples of that. We also have interesting examples of how weaving together of the broadcast I did on Zeno and that ancient area of the world and those amazing people, the great minds of civilization that were in Italy and Pythagoras off the coast of Spain, of Greece. And so we have another character that emerges today in that troupe of people, all of them with weird sort of Greek names. But we'll see how all of this sort of weaves together into a new understanding about how consciousness arrives out of the quantum field. For instance, here's one of the news feeds. Quantum properties of water discovered. Water is like a hologram. So this one's sort of new. Water is like a hologram. Research scientists at ORNL discovered water's so far unknown properties, which are contrary to the laws of classical physics, which means it's quantum. Water is special even based on its simple physical properties, since it is the only substance on Earth that can be found in all 3 states, liquid, solid, and gas. However, scientists at the U.S. Department of Energy, Oak Ridge, have discovered new properties of water that go beyond the known laws of classical physics. Passes through solid walls. During chemistry experiments carried out on the beryl crystal, it was discovered that water molecules under extreme physical or special geological conditions arrange themselves into ultra-small hexagonal shapes around a ring and enter a quantum tunneling state. Now, we've discussed quantum tunneling in the past. If you go back and look at the live stream in which I discussed the phonon universe, photons are to light as phonons are to sound. So this phenomenon goes beyond the known liquid, solid, or gaseous states, and in this case, water behaves quite differently than what we are accustomed to, since it is capable of quantum motion. In this state, for example, water particles pass through solid walls, which according to the rules of classical physics is absolutely impossible. It's the beauty of the whole concept of quantum physics, is where we have these sort of 2 worlds, this classical world, the classical Newtonian world, that fits nicely with this sort of math that you can learn in high school and college that describes, heat and motion and angles and things. It does quite well until you get down to, what things are made of, like the atoms. And once you get to the atomic scale, as I've said before, that's the smallest physical property of substance that still retains its properties as a substance in this classical macro world. An atom of gold is the smallest particle of gold that you can possibly have, because below that it's just protons and electrons and neutrons, the sort of letters of the alphabet. So on the other side of that periodic table wall is the quantum world, which is weird and odd and doesn't seem to obey any of the rules that we normally see out here. So everything we look upon out here that seems to be normal, that we accept as things in the world, is all based on inner rules at a subquantum level that appear like magic. Everything in this world, with the skeptics who say, I don't believe it if I can't see it, then in the quantum world, you can't see anything, and nothing that you see makes sense. It's Alice in Wonderland on the other side of the looking glass, and the looking glass is the periodic table. So in this state, for example, water particles pass through solid walls, which according to the rules of classical physics is impossible. This is the ordered state of normal reality, folks, that classical physics on this side of the wall appear to make sense to us because we've grown up here. But once we peek behind the curtain and look at what all this is based on, it's all based on things that pop in and out of existence, where time flows forward and backwards at the same time. Things are entangled across the universe. Definitely Alice in Wonderland. During the experiment, it was found that when the water is trapped in an enclosed area inside crystals, for instance, as I've talked about in the past, the water in the body exists as a special classification of water. It's biological water. It's colloidal water. It's water that is in a transition state, that is teetering on the borderline of a razor-thin line of water on this side and a liquid crystal on this side. So the properties of certain types of crystals have a certain atomic lattice work that makes them special than any other material on Earth. And if you put pressure and torque on these crystals at an atomic level, the lattice work that makes up the scaffolding of how this is constructed atomically, the lattice is bent, and bending the lattice causes an electrical discharge from a crystal called the piezoelectric effect. And the piezoelectric effect is used extensively on multiple levels in the body and how it functions. And in particular, where we have a crystal that has these properties can be liquefied into a liquid crystal that has the same properties. And so now we have a liquid that has a lattice work atomic structure similar to the solid form. And the liquid form also is, when it's put under pressure, causes piezoelectric discharges. And so for the body, which is 70% water, and the brain, which is a larger percentage of water than that, for that water to exhibit properties of piezoelectric discharge, particularly in the brain and nervous system, which runs on electrical discharges, and the property that we have blood going through arteries and veins in a state of motion, and the blood has got hemoglobin, and the hemoglobin is what carries the oxygen around. and snatches up the CO2 to expel it out when we expire our breath. High school physics tells us that a particle with magnetic properties, and iron is one of two on the whole periodic table that have magnetic properties. You can make a magnet out of iron, but you can't make a magnet out of copper or tin or zinc or titanium or gold or anything else. No other thing on the whole periodic table, no other atom has magnetic properties except the rare earths, which are rare. So the body is going to use something that's common and easy to get, iron. It's going to build a molecule around it, hemoglobin, and the properties of iron atomically is looking to complete its outer shell of electrons to the proper number, and oxygen fills the bill of that. Oxygen is looking to complete its outer shell with 7, and iron, has the 7, but it needs 1 more to make an 8th, and oxygen has that 1 more, the only one it's got in its outer orbit. So the two of them get married, and they form iron oxide. Iron oxide is essentially rusty iron, and rust is red, and that's why blood is red. But the fact that you've got little magnets, iron particles in the hemoglobin in motion moving through your arteries and veins generates an electrical field. High school physics. A magnet in motion generates an electrical field. Electricity in motion, electricity going through the nerves in your body, create a magnetic field at right angles. So all the chi energy, which is electromagnetic, moving through the meridians is generating magnetic fields at right angles. All of the nerve firings going down your spinal cord and your nerve roots and your brain are producing a magnetic field at right angles to the electricity in motion. And the mingling of the electrical generated field from the blood mingling with the magnetic fields of the meridian chi and the nerves firing form a matrix of electromagnetic field that mingles with the piezoelectric effect of the water that the body is mostly made of. So this whole matrix of motion, spin, pressure, piezoelectric, the fact that the colloidal fluids in my body can flip over to a liquid crystal, so my whole water body becomes a giant crystal, generating its own piezoelectric fields that mingle with the other fields the other systems are doing, and they're all in tune. And the tuningness of how they're put together is also based on the law of harmonics and overtones, which is basically music theory. So during the experiment, it was found that when the water is trapped in an enclosed area, like inside of a crystal, or inside of your body as a liquid crystal, the oxygen and hydrogen atoms of water molecules delocalize. They separate from each other. And this is when the quantum tunneling mechanism is created. The tunnel effect is a quantum mechanical phenomenon. In the tunnel effect, particles can move through such barriers that would be impossible according to the laws of classical physics, occupying 6 positions simultaneously. So all of a sudden, under pressure, the kind of pressure that activates a liquid crystal, the water molecules throughout your whole body and inside your brain can delocalize and form a pattern of 6 different positions of water molecules all at the same time in a quantum field. And each of those 6 can tunnel through solid materials and solid matter. The kind of solid matter that would represent a barrier, like your brain, or like your body, or like your bones, or like anything else in your body that appears to be solid. Water can have a property under pressure, right? And in the brain, there is pressurized fluid, cerebrospinal fluid under pressure, pumping around the cranial and the craniosacral pump. So all of a sudden, this starts to poke at new properties of how water and fluids and blood circulating and cerebrospinal fluid all have effects on the brain and the central nervous system. We're going to hone in on that. All the properties I'm going to describe have a general influence in every single square centimeter of your body that is filled with fluid. So the properties of water that we're going to discuss today will have many levels of activity from a cellular level all the way out into gross organs and glands and meridians and chi and chakras and subtle energy fields and all the rest of it, all mingling together with electromagnetic influences from all these different structures interacting together. And underlying all of that is the water itself, which can go into pressurized states that exhibit quantum qualities that can tunnel through physical matter, where you would think there would be a barrier, but there's no longer a barrier anymore. Physicists discover a new state of water molecule. Hydrogen tunnels. Water molecules trapped within barrel channels. Water molecules trapped in tiny channels exist in a blurry quantum superposition of 6 different configurations that bears little resemblance to the structure of a free water molecule. That is the finding of physicists in the US and UK who have used neutron scattering to map the location of hydrogen atoms in water molecules trapped in the mineral beryl, which is a crystal, revealing that the atoms tunnel between the 6 configurations. The researchers have also found evidence that, unlike normal water, a trapped molecule has a 0 electric dipole moment. The research should shed light on how water behaves when confined to tiny spaces, such as the membranes of a living cell. So one of the interesting properties of water, as I discussed before in the episode I did on water, the water molecule is unique because, number one, it combines oxygen and hydrogen, H2O, 2 oxygens to 1 hydrogen atom, and hydrogen is the most primordial atom in the entire universe. It's the very first one to ever form in the universe after the Big Bang, and it's the most abundant atom in the universe and the oldest and the most primordial. So there's one thing about water. It's basing itself on the most primordial atom that there is. And the 2 oxygens and the 1 hydrogen form this triangular, and actually three-dimensionally a tetrahedron, like a triangle with a square base, like the Cheops pyramid. It's not the same angle as that, but the angle is a very specific angle. I think it was 140 or something. I can't remember exactly. But the very specific angle that is forced to form because the oxygen is one charge and the hydrogen is a different charge, and they repel each other into this triangular shape. And because of that triangular shape, all kinds of interesting properties of water emerge that no other molecule can do. For instance, the angle causes a certain form of stacking of the water molecules together when it freezes up. So when it freezes, the frozen lattice form that shows up is a certain type of stacking of these triangular elements, which leaves all kinds of spaces between them because they don't stack really nicely and tightly together. They can't do that. And therefore, that's why the frozen form of water is lighter than the liquid form of water, which is the only molecule that does that. Every other kind of molecule, when it's in its frozen state, is heavier than its liquid state, and it sinks to the bottom, Not so with water. Its frozen form floats to the top. Membranes of living cells. This is the kind of stuff that is going on at a quantum level in all the cells of your body. And all the cells of your body are composed of intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid that they're floating in. And the only difference between those two worlds is the membrane of the cell. Like the soap bubble kind of idea. The air inside the soap bubble and on the outside of the soap bubble itself is the membrane. Mysteries of water, unveiling quantum phenomena and future potential of water. Water is the universal solvent. There we are. 104.5 degrees is the funny angle. Water dissolves more substances than any other liquid, the universal solvent. The bent molecule shape makes it polar. It means it has a charge like a magnet, has a positive and negative end. It gives the oxygen atom a partial positive charge and the hydrogen atom's partial negative. Hydrogen, yeah, they screwed up on this. Gives the oxygen atom a partial negative charge and the hydrogen atoms a partial positive charges. I'm always surprised to find that I sort of know more than the people writing the article. How funny is that? Anyway, you can see it here. Oxygen negative charge, hydrogen partial positive charge, and that makes this a magnet that will attract and repel certain other molecular forms. The partial charges attract parts of polar molecules to dissolve them, and water does not dissolve non-polar molecules. There are certain molecules that is difficult for water to become a universal solvent for because they're non-polar molecules. They are not little magnets, so they're not responsive to the magnetic fields that arise from oxygen and hydrogen atoms stuck together like this. Journal of Molecular Evolution. There's a cool journal. Water and life, the medium is the message. Water, the most abundant compound on the surface of the earth and probably in the universe, is the medium of biology. But is much more than that. Water is the most frequent actor in the chemistry of metabolism. Our quantitation here reveals that water accounts for 99.4% of metabolites. Between a third and a half of known biochemical reactions involve consumption or production of water. Water is the essential ingredient of all the biochemical reactions that are going on in your body. As I've sort of discussed before, the body, in order to obey rule number one, survive at all costs, then I have to be faster than you. My brain has to be faster than you, have to be smarter than you, have to come to conclusions before you do. I have to move faster than you, I have to run faster than you. I have to be lickety-split. And so these split-second reactions in the body is what allows me to be the one who survives. The quicker I can make my reactions, the more survivability I've got. So biochemical reactions need to be fast. And the interesting thing about biochemical reactions is that they are notoriously slow. The majority of reactions that your body requires to be alive with are slow reactions. They're not snappy. So how do you solve this problem of requiring them to be snappy when they're normally sluggish and slow in a world that requires you to be snappy if you want to survive? And the secret to it is catalytic reactions, catalysts. So in chemistry, you have a slow reaction, but you can make it a fast reaction if you add a catalyst, another chemical to that, that causes an atomic reaction and makes it instantly happen. So essentially, one way of looking at the water-based system that we are is the body is a perfect chemical laboratory for creating the perfect conditions for catalysts to survive and thrive. So basically, our biochemical system is designed specifically to foster a good environment for catalysts to exist so that all my chemical reactions can be snappy. And what is required for that is a certain temperature, 98.6 degrees. So you got 6 different backup systems to make sure that the system is always maintained at 98.6 degrees so the catalysts can be at their best. If my temperature goes too far above that, 98.6 up to 105, I start having convulsions. If it goes too low, then I start going into coma. All my biochemical systems start to either boil at one end and make things crazy, or freeze up and become dormant at the other, and then I die. So there's this narrow little bandwidth that requires temperature. There's another narrow bandwidth that requires specific gravity. There's another little one that requires, the balance of electrolytes. The electromagnetic properties of the atoms that form the compounds in the biochemistry of me being alive, organ by organ, gland by gland, tissue by tissue. All of it in a vat of quantum properties of water. Well, so here, between a third and a half of known biochemical reactions involve consumption or production of water. So keep yourself hydrated. The other thing about water is that it regulates temperature in your body. So keeping that 98.6 degrees perfect, one of the big factors of how you keep it perfect is water itself, because water can absorb heat and carry it away and sweat it out and keep your body exactly at 98.6 degrees. So if the environment gets too hot, you sweat it out. And if the environment gets too cold, you close the pores. Water is the one who is draining the heat away or bringing heat to the situation and helping balance the whole system out. So water is a key component in maintaining body temperature. It does all these different things. I mean, this is a small little stupid list. It forms digestive compounds from saliva all the way down through your gut and duodenum and small intestine and all the different sort of digestive enzymes that are created, all of them existing in a water environment. Mucous membranes, body waste and urine, lubricating joints, major component of body parts needed in the brain to manufacture hormones, regulates body temperature, acts as a shock absorber for the brain and spinal cord, cerebral spinal fluid, converts food to components needed for survival, digestion, delivers oxygen all over the body, First direct observation of quantum tug between water molecules. Water molecules are kept together by the so-called hydrogen bond, an electrostatic force between such molecules. It is of incredible importance also in proteins and DNA, and it gives water some of its peculiar properties. And now researchers have directly observed how it can tug molecules when one is excited by a laser. Quantum tugging. So this is pointing out that First of all, if we take water and we start compressing it, it changes its quantum characteristics, and the oxygen and the hydrogen sort of split apart and go into this fuzzy state of 6 different types of quasi water molecules, and those water molecules have quantum properties that can penetrate through solid matter. Quantum tunneling under pressure. This one's pointing out the opposite of that, quantum tugging, where you pull them apart, where forces are yanking on the water molecule. And tugging on the water molecule causes a different type of quantum effect going on. So whether the molecule is being compressed or pulled apart, both of those initiate a quantum presence in water that now bridges the gap between this macro world and the quantum world. That water has 1 foot in each of these 2 worlds, unlike anything else in the universe. So when you begin to think about the fact that whether water is a colloidal fluid in the body or a liquid crystal that has piezoelectric effects, or whether the water is exhibiting quantum properties when it's squeezed or pulled, both of those cause quantum effects in water. And that kind of thing, the pressurization and the pulling apart, is what the body does all the time on a million different levels, and particularly in the brain, where it's a closed system under pressure, specifically with cerebrospinal fluid. No place else in the body is water subjected to compartmentalized, specifically under pressure, to float the brain in a vat of fluid, pressurized fluid, so it's protected from banging against the inside of the skull. And water, in that case, is an electrolyte that has electromagnetic properties, which means that now the brain and all of its sensitive electromagnetic tissue of the neurons is floating in a vat of electrolytic solution that makes all those nerve firings 100 times more efficient. Therefore, we want and we need to have constant, new, fresh cerebrospinal fluid bathing the brain every microsecond. So we have a cranial pump mechanism going on. The cranial pump mechanism is the skull, and the skull has got all these joints, and the joints all move with each respiration. It's called a cranial respiratory motion. And, you know, we pull this thing apart, and we can see that all these bones have joints and they're all fitting exactly together, and the base of the skull has got something like the sphenoid bone, which has the pituitary gland hanging in it, and the brain is sticking inside of here. And as the cranial bones expand, contract, and rotate with every respiration, you end up with the pumping mechanism of cerebrospinal fluid through the activation of the meninges that wrap around the brain, 3 layers of membranes. Physicists confirm quantum theory proposed in the 1930s. Professor David Mackenzie from the University of Sydney has demonstrated quantum tunneling in water, a quantum phenomenon first predicted by British theorist Dr. Ronald Wilfrid Gurney in 1931. Professor Mackenzie and Guo applied quantum techniques to understanding the electrolysis of water, which is the application of electrical current to water to produce the constituent elements hydrogen and oxygen. The researchers found that electrons can tunnel through barriers in aqueous solutions away from the electrodes, neutralizing ions of impurities in that water. So think about this for a minute. What this is pointing out is that in the presence of electrolysis, where you're running electrical currents into the water, The water, that will also excite a quantum tunneling thing in the water. So now there's three different things that will push water into a quantum state: pressure, pulling, and electricity, electromagnetic fields coming into the water. And as I said before, 90% water, and we've got electrical fields all over the place. We've got electrical fields running through our nerves, through the nervous system, through the brain. We've got electrical fields coming from the chi energy, which is electromagnetic, moving through meridian lines. We've got iron particles in the blood generate electrical fields. So the electrical fields now are charging the water and pushing the water both into a quantum state and into a liquid crystal state that generates piezoelectric effects, right, coming straight from the water, which is affecting the water itself from itself. The water is being forced to switch to a piezoelectric form, liquid crystal, generate electrical fields throughout the water, which push the water into a quantum state. This gets really intense when it's in the brain, because in the brain we've got special conditions. It's a closed system. The fluid inside is under pressure. The cerebrospinal fluid is under pressure, and that is already pushing the water into a quantum state. We've got all kinds of electrical discharges going on, which is causing this effect that we're reading about right here, that also push the water into a quantum tunneling state. In other articles, this quantum tunneling state is not just through solid matter, it's through dimensions. That quantum tunneling means that we can quantum tunnel into different parallel universes, different timelines in time and space. We can be here or anywhere instantaneously. That's the quantum entanglement idea. It may be water that is the primary way in which we entangle consciousness and activities in other dimensions and with each other, where time and space don't make any difference anymore. Origin of water's strange properties. Scientists capture a quantum tug between neighboring water molecules. Researchers have made the first direct observation of atomic motion in liquid water molecules that have been excited with laser light. Their result reveal effects that could underpin the microscopic origin of water's strange properties. The work sheds light on the web of hydrogen bonds that gives water its strange properties, which play a vital role in many chemical and biological processes. Now, they are exciting this quantum property of water with lasers. Lasers are coherent light that excites the properties at an atomic level. But lasers are not the only thing that can do that, as we've seen in the previous little articles here. Pressure will do it. Pulling will do it. Electromagnetic discharges into the water will do it. All of these things are causing the same phenomenon that these guys are seeing without having to use a laser. It's an inherent biological property of pressure and pulling and electricity that the body is exemplified itself in producing that particular environment in the shape of me. Quantum coherence domains in water. So quantum coherence, what do we mean by that? When things are coherent, it's essentially the same as the law of coupled oscillators, where we have things that synchronize up together based on the same laws of sympathetic resonance that we see in music theory, right? The reason why, if I start, if I hit certain keys on that piano back there, that are in a certain mathematical relationship to each other that we call a chord, then the vibrational frequencies mathematically fit together in a nice way, and we think that is pleasing because it reiterates the math that my subconscious mind at a quantum level used to create this body and all of its nested vibrational frequency patterns at an atomic and subatomic level, which are based on the same principles as music theory. So we essentially have coherence of resonance in all of my body systems. And they're seeing the same thing happening in water, that there's a coherence in the water molecule and in how water molecules relate to each other. Nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy has been used to investigate the quantum states of water molecules. Experiments have demonstrated that the spin states of hydrogen nuclei in water can exhibit quantum coherence. This suggests that water molecules could potentially store and transfer quantum information via their nuclear spin states, right? So now we're getting into the realm of science discovering how water molecules in the body, and particularly in the brain, can store information and become the foundation for a quantum computer. That the spin states of the nuclei in the water molecule is part of how the brain uses water as the foundation for a quantum computer. Neutron scattering. Neutron scattering experiments have shown long-range correlations between water molecules, which could be a signature of quantum entanglement. So now what we're saying is that the spin of the nuclei in the water, say in my brain, and that water in the brain is, particularly in the cerebrospinal fluid, is under pressure, which already pushes the water to a quantum state, and its electrical discharges, which push the water to a quantum state. And the pressure switches the water over into becoming a liquid crystal in its own right, and under pressure and electrical discharges causes this water as a liquid crystal to initiate its own electromagnetic discharges through the piezoelectric effect to aid the brain, so it doesn't have to generate all the electricity itself. The water is doing part of it. The water is generating electrical discharges. It may be a prediction that they will discover that the electrical discharges of water acting as a liquid crystal in the brain tissue is part of what is electrical discharges from the neurons associated with the consciousness itself. Check this one out. Homeopathic dilution studies. Some studies have shown biological effects in highly diluted solutions, suggesting a possible quantum mechanism like water memory. I did a whole live stream on homeopathy. Quantum, cosmic homeopathy is what I called it, where I discussed this in great depth. The quantum properties of water in homeopathic remedies, where the water is got the property of being able to memorize the quantum pattern of, say, an herb that affects your blood pressure. This is pointing out that the quantum mechanisms, which now we're seeing are multiple quantum mechanisms that are pushing water not only into its piezoelectric state, but pushing it by pressure or by stretching or by electrical field discharges, pushing water into a quantum state. And in a quantum state, a quantum mechanism like water memory, water needs to be, it's the quantum state properties of water which forms the quantum computer that can store gigantic, unimaginable amounts of memory. That water can hold memory. And what does that mean with the water that is in the brain, that is making up brain cells, being bathed by a different form of water in cerebrospinal fluid under pressure, where all the conditions are proper to hover water back and forth from a classical world to a quantum world in a free moving ability of water to have one foot in both worlds and reconcile the Newtonian world and the quantum world, like our scientists with their math have so far failed to figure out how to do. The whole concept of how do you reconcile the classical physics with quantum physics, particularly with got to do with gravity, water may be the one substance that's already figured out how to do that organically, and it exists in my brain, floating myself in this state between those two worlds where I can freely exchange back and forth between the two. But it may be that the brain itself is able to manufacture its own homeopathic solutions as part of the healing process globally throughout my body, where the homeopathic solution is manufactured under pressure in a quantum state in the brain. And then that is spread out through all the water that goes in my whole body. So it comes from here and it spreads throughout the whole system and populates that memory through all the cells, through the water, quantum water processes in my body. Here we are at NIH PubMed article, Entanglement Model of Homeopathy has an example of generalized entanglement predicted by the weak quantum theory. So not only is it spin states in the water molecule that push a quantum computer effect in water as part of the brain and the spinal cord, but this article is saying the homeopathic effect of that, of water memory extracting the primary principles of the blueprint pattern of different kinds of chemicals or neurochemicals or other kind of substances that have a global effect on the body for healing or changing my state, is communicating from its primary area of how it's manufactured in the brain under pressure that pushes the quantum state, and communicates to all the other water cells in the body through entanglement. So it doesn't have to actually spread mechanically through a chemical process to reach all my cells, that it can broadcast directly to them through entanglement, because it's all the same substance. It's all my water body, body water. And of course, we live on a water world. We're immersed in a sea of humidity and water. It's everywhere. But in particular, we need to talk about the fact that it's in the brain and how water in the brain pushes the idea of a quantum level of consciousness and awakening states of self-perception, of my self-existing, and things like that, is where all this is going. Calculations show that nerve fibers in the brain could emit pairs of entangled particles, and this quantum phenomenon might explain how different parts of the brain work together. Nerve fibers in the brain could produce pairs of particles linked by quantum entanglement. If backed by experimental observations, this phenomenon could explain how millions of cells in the brain synchronize their activity to make it function. So we already know from other articles that I've explained in previous broadcasts that PubMed articles have proven this point already, that the synchronization of various areas of the cortex on EEG, where these areas are resonating together in all kinds of different zones in the brain where they are not directly connected by axons one to the other, is partially explained by the law of coupled oscillators, where they're dancing together because they're dancing at the same drum beat in a synchronized event, the same way that the wine glass is going to start vibrating when I sing the correct note. So that's one. This article is explaining that another element of that is a quantum element of entanglement between different areas of the cortex, that these areas that are synchronizing together are also synchronizing because of entanglement. Whatever this one is doing, this one is also doing. So there is a quantum entanglement element of consciousness itself, because activity in neurons in the brain is closely associated with brainwave states, and brainwave states are closely associated with states of consciousness. Is quantum physics behind your brain's ability to think? From consciousness to long-term memories, the human brain has some peculiar computing abilities, and they could be explained by quantum fuzziness. So, as the previous examples have just shown, if we have the brain in a compressurized compartment with pressurized cerebrospinal fluid that has special electrolytic properties of its own, that makes all the electrical firings in my brain much easier to do, much more efficient to do, and the pressure gradient pushes the water into a liquid crystal state where those electromagnetic properties are enhanced one step more through the piezoelectric effect, and pushes water not only from colloidal fluid into a liquid crystal, but also pushes it into a quantum state where it splits up into 6 different versions of itself that can tunnel back and forth through solid matter and tunnel between dimensions. All of it in here. That this is saying that it may also be associated with long-term memories, that the memories that I have may be in the water in my brain cells as part of a quantum computer network, where the spin states of the water molecule, particularly when it's being pressurized, and electromagnetic fields and all the rest that are pushing it into a state that is a quantum state where these spins can hold memory, that my long-term memory and past life memories and all the rest of that might be all in the water molecules of the quantum computer of my mind. Which brings us to cerebrospinal fluid. And so the basics of cerebrospinal fluid is in the center of our brain are these ventricles. There's 4 of them, and they're big spaces. There's the lateral ventricles, and the ventricles are filled with cerebrospinal fluid. They're manufactured here. Cerebrospinal fluid is manufactured in the walls of these ventricles, which pass by tubes from one ventricle to the next, and finally circulate around the brain between 3 different membranes that wrap around the brain and spinal cord all the way down. Here's another picture of the ventricles. So we've got the lateral ventricles. There's a right one and a left one. And in the middle of those two is this one, the third ventricle, which comes down this aqueduct of Sylvis to the fourth ventricle, which comes with the tube that comes down and circulates it between the meninges that wrap around the brain and wrap around the spinal cord all the way down. Here's another view. There's the lateral ventricles. This one's in the middle, comes down to the fourth ventricle, and then circulates around the brain. There is a direction of flow. Fluid moves from the lateral ventricles into the third and fourth ventricles. It then flows around the outer brain area and along the central canal and the outer surface of the spinal cord. The site of fluid production is inside the ventricles, these areas called the choroid plexus. Choroid plexus. Cerebrospinal fluid is produced in thin-walled capillaries surrounded by epithelial cells called choroid plexuses that line the ventricle walls. So inside the ventricles are these grape-like clusters that produce the cerebrospinal fluid. It produces 500 milliliters a day, which is a small beaker full, around this big. 500 milliliters a day is produced in the inside of the brain, circulates out around. Part of the duty of cerebrospinal fluid is not just to charge the brain as an electrolyte and under pressure to float the brain so it's got neutral buoyancy, and to protect the brain from striking the inside of the skull because it's pressurized. It's also cleaning waste. It's carrying debris from the biochemical processes of brain activity into the cerebrospinal fluid, and its final place where it circulates out of the system is at the top of your skull in a big vein up there called the sagittal sinus. So the cerebrospinal fluid eventually filters out and goes into the sagittal sinus, and the junk that is carrying away from the brain is filtered out through the kidneys and the liver and the bowels and the rest stuff like that. After circulating, cerebrospinal fluid is reabsorbed into blood through arachnoid granulations, which are projections from the arachnoid layer of the membranes that covers the brain. Fluid circulation around the spinal cord, aided by vertebral movement, fluid flows along the central canal and outer surface of the spinal cord all the way down. Here's a closer look at the meninges. So this is the skull bone right here with the trabecula. This is the skin here. This is the skull with trabecula. This here is the outer layer of membranes attached to the skull called the dura mater. This in the middle is called arachnoid matter because it looks like spider webs. And the inside layer attaches directly onto the brain, and that's called pia mater. Each one of these three is very different from the other ones. Pia mater is semi-permeable, so things can pass through it very easily. Nutrients and cerebrospinal fluid and the rest can go back and forth around the brain. Arachnoid matter is still partially a mystery of why it looks like this, but I think I have an answer to that. Dura mater on the outside is very tough fibroelastic tissue that's even difficult to cut with scissors. It attaches to the inside of the skull, and it is not permeable at all. It's very tough stuff. Dura means durable mother. Tough mother is what dura mater means. So the arachnoid mater is really where the cerebrospinal fluid flows through this layer, and it can pass back and forth through the arachnoid matter and bathe the brain directly and sweep the debris away through the semi-permeable membrane back into the cerebrospinal fluid, which flows through this sort of spiderweb zone. Back in the 80s, I experienced my first waterbed. And back in the old days, a waterbed was just a big bag filled with water in a bed frame. And when you got on a waterbed, you would have this wave thing that would happen, that you would have to lay very still for the waves sloshing back and forth from your body getting on the bed to finally subside and quiet down. The problem is that anytime you moved in the bed, you would create new waves that would do this thing, and that was a big problem. So the industry solved that problem by building rubber baffles inside the container of the bed where the water was. So now the water had these rubber walls with holes poked through them to break up the wave action. So now the waves couldn't go swinging from one end of the bed to the other. They would hit these baffles and stop. Some of the water would go through little holes. If another wave was to form, it would be hitting the other baffle and going through some of the little holes. And so that would break up all the wave action through these baffle networks. And that's what I believe the arachnoid matter is doing with cerebrospinal fluid. If you didn't have some baffles like this to break up the wave action, you would get wave effects of the cerebrospinal fluid, and it wouldn't be a stable fluid the way that this makes it stable. The body thinks of everything, right? Yeah. And so once again, the meninges wrap around the outside of the brain, attached to the inside of the skull. And because the dura mater is attached to the inside of the skull, and the skull is various skull bones all assembled together like a jigsaw puzzle, the movement of those bones with every respiration, where they're expanding, contracting, and rotating and doing all kinds of other stuff, is tugging on the dura mater, which attaches to the inside of these skull bones. So as the skull bones move and rotate, it's torquing and tugging on the dura mater, and that is the pumping mechanism to squeeze and push the cerebrospinal fluid and pump it around the skull. The meninges come around and wrap around the opening at the bottom of the brain, at the bottom of the skull, where the big opening is, where the brain stem and it becomes the spinal cord, right around here. So the meninges all come around and they attach themselves at that ring of the opening, and then run freely down the spinal cord all the way to the bottom of the spinal cord with minimal attachments. So this bag that runs, there's three bags that run around the head attached to that opening, run free all the way, and then so the action of the occipital bone and the sacrum are sort of rocking together with each respiration, tugging the dura mater and pumping cerebrospinal fluid up and down the spine. Remember, cerebrospinal fluid is an electrolyte, so that means that not only am I charging up the brain, I'm charging the entire nervous system. I'm charging the entire spinal cord all the way down and the brainstem all the way down with circulating electrolytic solutions. And so here you can see that the meninges wrap around the brain. They attach here at the foramen magnum, which is the big opening, and run freely around the spinal cord, all three layers, dura, arachnoid, and pia mater, around the spinal cord all the way down to the bottom. So we've got the ventricles creating the CSF out into the membranes that wrap around the brain, circulating all the way down the spinal cord, back and forth. with craniorespiratory motion. Brain fluid may travel to distant parts of the body. Finding could lead to new ways to deliver drugs. Well, screw that, but nerves throughout the body depicted here in this artist's illustration may be bathed in cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid flow extends to peripheral nerves, further unifying the nervous system. So that means that the meninges that wrap around the brain, the three layers, and attach here and go down the spinal cord all the way to the bottom and charge the spinal cord, don't stop at the spinal cord. It goes out every single nerve root at every single spinal level of every vertebral level, where there's two nerve roots that come out and go into all the different parts of the body. The three layers of membranes go out all those nerves and carry cerebrospinal fluid into the entire network, all the way down to a microscopic level of nerves throughout my body. So my whole body is being charged with this cerebrospinal fluid electrolyte charging system for my whole nervous system. And sort of, excuse me, but you know, science discovers what the rest of us in the holistic world have been preaching now for 70 years. I learned this in chiropractic school 50 years ago, right? I graduated in 1980. So in the late 70s is when I was learning this stuff. And, quote, modern science is now making a big discovery. Excuse me. But here we have the brain and the spinal cord and the nerve roots sort of laid on its side, where they injected gold, monatomic gold, and that's how they discovered that it went out the nerve roots and was not just confined to the spinal cord. Here are the micrographs showing positive proof that the cerebrospinal fluid is in all of these external structures out here. You know, that means that the cerebrospinal fluid is not only going down the spine, but is coming out each one of these nerve roots all the way out into all the structures in the body. The entire system is a giant network of charged electrolytic fluid pumped around and manufactured in the center of the brain. Center of the brain to the distal fingertips. This whole system is charged by your brain. Here's the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is associated with, you know, the crown chakra. Crown chakra is where the door opens, where I have free communication with channels in the universe. Which channel are you listening to? And if you remember from previous broadcasts, the pineal gland has quartz crystals inside. Microscopic crystals are inside the pineal gland, and the crystals have piezoelectric properties. So the pressure of the cerebrospinal fluid on the pineal gland, which extends into the third ventricle. So in the scheme of things with the chakras, all the chakras from the neck down are glands that have an instant effect on the body. Each gland goes with one of the chakras. The pituitary gland, or the brow chakra, also is an endocrine gland, but it produces a whole range of hormones that don't affect the body at all, but they target the endocrine glands. So this is the conductor of the orchestra, and this is the orchestra members. The pineal gland in the center of the brain is the only gland that doesn't excrete its hormone into the blood like all the rest. It secretes its hormone into the cerebrospinal fluid, and its location is in the third ventricle, inside the ventricle where the cerebrospinal fluid is. And the cerebrospinal fluid is under pressure. And we now know that the pressure is what's necessary to push the crystals inside the pineal gland and make them and push them into the piezoelectric effect, so that the pressure of the cerebrospinal fluid, and in particular the pressure of different asanas and breathing associated with each of the chakras, increases intrathecal pressure with each chakra coming up with different muscles to push the air out, and puts more and more pressure on the pineal gland through its fluid interactions inside the third ventricle, and pushes the crystals inside the pineal gland to create electromagnetic discharges, and pushes the whole mechanism into a crystal radio set. So back when I was a kid, you would have a quartz crystal hooked up to this little radio set with some twisted, copper wires around a thing that was your channel selector, and it didn't plug in, it didn't have batteries, it was running from pressure on the crystal to make it run. And the crystal became an antenna that pulled in radio signals that you could dial back and forth and to pick up different stations. And that's essentially what's going on here organically, where this is a crystal radio set activated by piezoelectricity factors in the crystals inside. And the question is, what channel are you listening to in the cosmos? What channel? We can choose whatever channels we want. Harmonizing the cosmos and consciousness. Profound parallels between the universe and the human brain. Case for why our universe may be a giant neural network. Neuroscientist and author Bobby Azarian explores the idea that the universe is a self-organizing system that evolves and learns. The concept of a brain-like universe, seeded by pre-Socratic philosopher, this guy, here we go, it's Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras. The concept of a brain-like universe seeded by pre-Socratic philosopher Anaxagoras is gaining currency. The cosmos looks remarkably similar to the complete wiring diagram of the brain, and non-local connections could enable computation. Stephen Hawking saw a path to a new philosophy of physics based on a view of the universe as a self-organizing entity. Now, we have discussed this so many times in the past and shown pictures of sort of the connectome in the brain that looks like the connectome in the cosmos, the pathways and highways that the galaxies and the nebulas follow along the densest of their compaction along these highways in the cosmos, looks almost identical to the connectome in the brain. If you buy the idea that the whole cosmic network is a giant living organism that is holographically fractalized, so that everything is repeated in every dimension and every size scale, and as far as sound is concerned, in every speed scale. This is not such a crazy idea. However, here we are again to the pre-Socratic philosophers. In this case is Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras of Clazomenai. Remember what I said? They were always called, their names are always associated with where they were from, right? Anaxagoras of Clazomenai, a pre-Socratic natural philosopher, lived from about 510 BC to around 430 BC, so he was philosophizing about 40 years. There is Clazomenai in Asia Minor. And the rest of them that we discussed when I did the broadcast on Zeno were over here in Italy, where Zeno and his crew were around in here. Pythagoras was down in here, and then Pythagoras moved to Samos, the island of Samos, over more towards this area. So these guys were all very close together. Some were in here, some were here, some were here, some were here. This was the world at that time. These philosophers arising and schools of thought arising. Anaxagoras of Clazomenae. Amazing how far back it was that these original ideas that are now being, quote, rediscovered in quantum physics as being real, responded to the claims of Parmenides. So remember, Parmenides was the guy who created the school that Zeno was part of, and the two of them were the two great minds of the time. So here we've got Anaxagoras responding to the claims of Parmenides on the impossibility of change. Anaxagoras introduced the concept of nous, the cosmic mind, as an ordering force. He also gave several novel scientific accounts of natural phenomena, including the notion of panspermia, which I covered in detail in the broadcast a few years ago on Gaia, on the Earth, on Pangaea was what that broadcast was. If you want to go and watch that one, the Pangaea broadcast from 2 or 3 years ago, and the notion of how is life permeated on different planets throughout the universe. Where did life come from on our Earth? And panspermia is that life exists throughout the universe and could be distributed everywhere through comets and rocks that strike the Earth and in water. He deduced a correct explanation for eclipses and described the sun as a fiery mass larger than the Peloponnesian idea of that the sun was pretty small, and also attempt to explain rainbows and meteors and a whole bunch of other stuff. Pretty amazing guy. Anaxagoras of Clazomenae postulated another element called the ether, which was in constant rotation and carried with it the celestial bodies. He also believed that there was a directing intelligence in nature that he called nous, which gives order to what otherwise would be a chaotic universe. By nous, he meant literally the mind of the cosmos. Anaxagoras was the last of the Ionian physicists. Interesting to bring that little part back into here from that same area of the world as Zeno, that I just covered it recently. But his idea that of nous, that the universe, that the cosmos is a giant entity, and that there is a self-organizing principle of consciousness that organizes all of this together in all of its sizes and its shapes and its dimensions and its fractal holographic nature, going back to 500 BC, not bad. All of it in order for your deepest part of your consciousness to wake up. To wake up to the full cognition of what this all is. That when I wake up, it's the universe waking up to view itself. So from one standpoint, all the evolution of the entire universe and all the things that had to happen for life to arrive on the earth and evolve into the form that you and I are right now, and that a certain small percentage of us would continue to open the flower of our consciousness the way it was intended for moments of self-realization and cosmic realization was all the steps that the universe had to go through in order to see itself consciously, to experience the magnificence of its own creation from the creation it made in order to do that. It's a great yin-yang. All of evolutionary processes in the cosmos, from this standpoint, their purpose is to create a life form that could wake up to see the magnificence of what has been created. And once again, there's power in numbers. Then we have the possibility of awakening a group mind, a collective unconscious mind that can experience the cosmos at a deeper level than any one of us would ever have the power to get to on our own. And in the process, make the deepest change possible in what kind of experience we have here in the world that we're creating together. Brings us to our headphones. And close your eyes and take a big breath. And here we go. Thank you all. Keep returning back to these areas of the grand philosophers of time. I feel like I need to sort of dress myself up with my hat of the time. Thing. There we go. Yeah. Now I look the part. Renaissance teacher, surrounded by colonnades and marble statues as we discuss the nature of reality 3,000 years before quantum finally discovers it. So thank you all. Blessings to everyone. It's my great honor and privilege to be with you and to share this space with you. So looking forward to seeing you all next Sunday. I'm going to keep this open for another 30 minutes or so for the chat. Then we can all move over to the Discord channel. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you next week.